Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Evans. I'm the executive director of the Alabama Writers Forum. I see a lot of familiar faces and names on this Zoom and a lot of new folks on this Zoom. So for the new people, I want to introduce who we are as a Writers Forum first, and then we'll begin our workshop for today. So the Alabama Writers Forum is a partnership program of the Alabama State Council on the Arts. Our mission is to support the literary arts in Alabama, and we do that by supporting writers at all stages, from kindergartners who are just starting out writing their first poem through to our Alabama Writers Hall of Fame and everyone in between. And today is part of doing that mission. We're here to support writers and to get more people into the Alabama writers community. So I encourage you to follow us on Facebook. Check out our website, writersforum.org. If you are a published writer, I encourage you to fill out your profile on the Alabama Authors Directory, which is on our website. That's totally free, but that's a way for us to promote all of the writers in Alabama. So if you have something written, please fill out your profile on that, and that helps us connect you with readers. Okay, so today's workshop is all about publishing. This is kind of a publishing 101 workshop, and we have brought in three really spectacular guest panelists to help talk us through how to get published. So I'll briefly introduce our three panelists today, and then I'll kick us off by asking the first question. So we are joined today by Dr. Sue Brannan Walker. Dr. Walker is a critically acclaimed poet, author, editor, playwright, professor, scholar. She is the Stokes Distinguished Professor of Creative Writing at the University of South Alabama, where she also teaches courses on ecology and Southern literature. She is a prolific editor and publisher as well through the award-winning independent press, Negative Capability Press. She was the 10th Poet Laureate of Alabama and has received numerous awards and honors. Most recently, she was named to the Alabama Writers Hall of Fame, and I invite you all to come out and see her get inducted in March 2025 in Tuscaloosa. A fun fact that I learned about Sue today is that every February 5th in Foley, Alabama is Sue Walker Day. I think that's a pretty delightful mark on her very remarkable resume. We're also joined today by Daniel Waterman. Dan is the editor-in-chief of the University of Alabama Press. Dan brings 27 years of experience as an acquisitions editor and publisher, both in trade and scholarly book publishing. Dan has worked with hundreds of authors throughout his career in genres ranging from fiction, memoir, criticism, biography, history, and current affairs. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. We also have Dr. Kim Shackelford. Dr. Shackelford was previously a professor of social work at the University of Mississippi and at Auburn University. She has written 2 books and numerous articles in the field of child welfare and advocacy. She recently co-authored Act 2, Footprints in Gulf Shores, a collection of stories, memories, and poetry, and she now runs, along with her co-owners, Beach Bards Publishing. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Shackelford. We will begin by asking the question that is the theme of this workshop, and we'll start with Sue, then go to Dan, then go to Kim. And the first question is kind of an overarching main ideas that we want to get across. So the question will be, so I've written a book manuscript, what comes next? Sue, take it away. And unmute yourself, please, Sue. You're muted, Sue.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay, I just jotted down 6 things. And the first is who is going to retain the copyright? Will the publisher have the copyright or will the author have the copyright? And the second thing is who's doing the editing and proofreading? Does that come from the press or is that separate? And then who's going to promote this? What about marketing? And then what costs will the author incur in the publishing process? And what's the royalty structure? And where will your book be sold once you get it in print? Will that be Amazon, Ingram, Barnes and Noble, wherever? So those are just quick 5 or 6 questions.
Thank you so much, Sue. Dan, what do you think about this question? We've written the book Manuscript. What comes next? Some overarching ideas.
Well, I think first, each author needs to think about what they want to do with it. How important is publishing the book to them? I'm assuming most people are here because it is of interest that the people who are here are interested in getting their work out into the world in some way. So a good important first step, and this is something one can do even while you're writing, is to study the marketplace and to try to get a handle on what presses out there, large presses, small presses, independent presses, are doing work or publishing work like your own, and that might be suitable candidates for places to submit your work for consideration. I think the second thing to think about, in addition to what kind of publisher, what kind of press might be appropriate for your work, is to be thinking about the best way to pitch or propose or frame the work that you would like them to consider, ways to put the most compelling spin on it to make it the most appealing to a given publisher. Making sure you understand how your work aligns with other books that they've already done, letting them know that you're aware of the other books they've published, the other authors that they've published, that you see your own work as fitting in with work that they've already done. It shows that you've done your homework, that you understand what they do and you're there for a good reason. So understanding the possible homes for your work, it takes a lot of work and research, but I think that's an important first step.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Shackelford, your opening thoughts.
I kind of took it a step back, and I agree with everything Dan and Sue said. And I'm looking at the number of people and thinking everyone may be at a different place. I mean, it may be that you just finished the manuscript and you're like, oh, I put an ending, I've got to the end and I have my ending. Or you've done some of what I'm going to talk about, and that is to then first thing I would, if you're at the end and you've written this manuscript, is that you then have to put it down for a little bit. And it just depends on you how long, and then come back to it and look at it again. Stephen King says that we always write for ourselves first. We write to get it out and to get it on the page. And then the second time, the second, third reviews are, like Dan was talking about, thinking about your audience and who are you writing this for and who do you want to read it, and how, what needs to change in there that would appeal to the reader and the one you're trying to reach. But then the first thing that comes to my mind is when you have it to a point where you're actually going to turn it over to someone else to read, is to emotionally prepare. I mean, I went all the way back there when you asked that question. I was like, you have to emotionally prepare yourself to turn that creation that, that I almost look at it as like your baby, it's like you have to turn it over to someone else for critique and for their understanding. And then there's a whole host of things that you go through in that editing process with other people, with other readers, and then with a professional editor. Stop there.
Thank you so much. So my next question, and we'll start with Sue on this one, is about agents. What role do agents play in publishing? When might an author want to work with an agent? And what should we look out for when talking with different kinds of agents involved in the publishing world?
Well, I'm not for agents, actually. That just adds another person into the complexity of things. And you pay them a lot of money. And so I just personally don't want an agent for myself, and I don't recommend it to anybody that we are publishing.
Dan, what do you think about this question?
I've worked with plenty of agents over the years, and I would say that the vast majority of writers don't really need an agent. And agents help with a number of things, but principally agents, if you really want to publish with one of the big major New York trade publishers, really your only chance of having your work considered by a Random House or Simon Schuster or Knopf or one of their many imprints, HarperCollins, Macmillan. The only real way to have a shot at publishing with one of those major publishers is through the auspices of an agent representing your work. Otherwise, I don't really think it's necessary. There are so many smaller presses and independent presses that will consider manuscripts without any kind of representation and don't expect your work to come to them via an agent. And in fact, if you're aiming for those kinds of small publishers, it would probably be very difficult to get an agent to represent the work because they're compensated by taking a percentage, usually around 15% of any revenue that the author is due. So they want to spend time with works that they feel are going to be the most lucrative for both the author and thus for themselves. If money is not your incentive and a major New York trade publisher is probably not in the picture, I just don't see the need. You can ably submit and represent your own work to the kinds of small press publishers of poetry, memoir, so on, fiction even, without representation.
Great, thanks a lot, Dan. Kim, what do you think about this question of agents?
I agree with them. I've heard, I've had several people come to me and talk to me and tell me that they had paid an agent up front to go promote their book and find them a publisher. And that should never happen. It should never, ever happen. They should get a percentage once it is published. And so if there's many people out there that are ripe and ready to pounce on you when they hear you have a book and say, oh, I could get you, get you published and give me the thousands of dollars, and then they don't do anything. So be very, my initial response is be very careful and do everything that Sue and Dan said and think through, who is your audience and what publishers are out there that publish what you did, the kind of thing that you did, and go directly to them and learn how to write a good query letter yourself. You can do that yourself. You know your book better than anyone else. You can write that query letter. You just have to learn how to do it and do the research as to what publishers are out there that publish what you wrote. Or decide, if you decide to self-publish, you definitely don't need an agent.
Well, that's a great segue to our next question. Yet again, we'll start with Sue on this one. What do you think about self-publishing, such as Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, with Amazon? When is it a good idea to self-publish, Sue?
Well, there are two things that come to my mind immediately is time. And so if you're waiting on a big publisher, you may wait some time before that book process is fulfilled. And so, but if you want a quicker book out, then you can go to KDP. And I do see that Amazon and KDP have someone who will help you. They advertise on their website someone to help you get that book into their format, into their KDP publishing format. So I think in a lot of cases, you know, it's a time-consuming process to find who you will publish, what kind of turnaround time they have, how many books they're trying to get out before they get to your book. And so it all depends on what you want. Alice asked the Cheshire Cat, how do I get there from here? And the Cheshire Cat said, it depends on where you want to get to, my dear. And so I guess it depends on how quickly you want to book out and how professional that you can do it yourself. And I would say to everyone, proofread, 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 please.
Good advice always. Dan, what do you think about this question of self-publishing?
I think it's a double-edged sword. I have nothing against self-publishing. I do not look down upon it. In fact, I think it's an amazing resource that has become more and more sophisticated over the last
what you doing?
Over the last 8 to 10 years. The number of ways that one can self-publish these days, it's really become quite remarkable. And it is a good option for certain situations. One, to follow on what Sue said, it's a good option for people who want to control every aspect, because you work with if you work with an established publisher, there are certain things you're going to have to relinquish control over. It may be the look of the book, it may be the price of the book, it may be there are all sorts of things that the publisher will have a final say in. Self-publishing allows you to control the look, the price, all sorts of things. So if you really want to control every facet of it, from the design and the cover to the price, it's a good option. For people who have reached a dead end or just are frustrated with making overtures to publishers of any size, it's also a good option. It allows you to get copies of your book out into the world, to get them into the hands of those you want to read them and spend time with them. And a third option, which I think is a really good reason for self-publishing, there are many people who've written accounts of their lives or their ancestors' lives that they really just want to leave for their family. And I think that's a wonderful way to do it. Amazon KDP is one option. Ingram Spark is another option. And there are a few others that I think do good jobs. It will cost you. In certain cases, you will have to front some money. But for self-publishing, I don't see it as being, one has to look carefully at what you are paying for and what you're getting in return, because they all have tiers of packages, and not every tier is right for everyone. Never pay an agent anything. An agent who asks for money up front, that's a scam.
Great. Thanks a lot. Kim, you have a lot of experience in self-publishing. What do you think about this?
Well, you know, I used publishers for the academic books, and actually did try to find a publisher for a very different book that two colleagues and I wrote together. It was mostly memoir, some poetry. It's a mixture, so it was hard to find our niche in the publishing world. And we did try, we sent it out, sent query letters, but it was a timely book, like Sue said. It was a book that had things, had reactions to the pandemic. It had reactions to Hurricane Sally. It was very geographically centered on the coast of Alabama. So there were all these things that kept it out of the regular publishing world. So we did make a decision, the three of us, to self-publish. And then it's a process too. Then you don't have anybody making those decisions for you. We used KDP. I've used KDP, and I have learned how to use Ingram Spark. I haven't gone through and done it, but I know the particulars and the reasons why you would do that. But there's a lot to learn to even do the self-publishing, the formatting. You have to do your own, find someone or get help with the cover design, a lot of decisions about pricing, and you're out there on your own. That's one of the drawbacks, is you're out there on your own trying to make all these decisions, and just hit or miss. It's hit or miss for the most part. But I think it is very worthwhile. We had the stories we wanted to have for our family and our friends, and a very specific niche of people who want to retire to the coast of Alabama. So I mean, that was and it's selling. It's not, one thing I would say for sure is self-publishing. Don't go into it thinking you're going to make a lot of money, because that's just not going to happen. But your message and your story can get out there too, and it can get out there quicker, and it can reach the people that you want it to reach.
Great, thanks a lot. I think this issue of don't expect to make a lot of money, I think that applies to publishing writ large, not just self-publishing, but that's certainly a part of it. Okay, so we've got our manuscript. We've decided that we probably want to go with a traditional publishing route. My question for you next is, how do you pitch? How do you bring your manuscript idea to a publisher? What is a query letter? And what are some of the common mistakes that you all see first-time authors make when they're pitching their projects to you? We'll start with Sue.
I think the element of proofreading, to be sure that you do not have typos. And sometimes I find that the computer will do some spelling things that you didn't really intend. And the author knows it so well that they know what is supposed to be there and may not actually see what is there. So they need someone else, a good friend, a beta reader, someone else to look at the manuscript and proofread it carefully before it ever goes out to the would-be publisher. So proofreading is very, very important.
Dan, what do you think? How do we pitch?
When it comes to creative writing, things like fiction and poetry or even memoir, I think first one needs to write a very polite but brief and clinical letter of a query letter saying what it is you are proposing or suggesting for publication consideration and why you are coming to them, which goes back to my point about market research. Be able to tell that publisher why you think they would be a good home for that work. In terms of the actual pitch document, I think there are a couple possible pitfalls. One is overselling it, over advocating for it, making it seem something it's really not, going on at too long a length about what the collection or the stories or the novel are. My counsel to everyone is, I think everyone should have, I think everyone should spend time writing their own jacket copy. I think if you study the jacket copy or the back cover copy that trade publishers or any publisher puts onto the book, you're going to find models for poetic, succinct, mysterious, engaging ways, because that's where the publisher is going to sell the book to the public. You need to be able to have that same skill set in terms of framing in 150, 200, 250 words, something that leaves something to the imagination that is going to make an editor want to read more. And it's the same strategy that goes into cover copy, jacket copy. I think every writer ought to try it. I think they ought to try it multiple times. I think they ought to try it in multiple voices. And one of those brief synopsis or summaries that's written as marketing copy will do the most good in convincing an editor to look further into it. Something that leaves them wanting to know more.
Yeah. Kim, do you have some advice for us on how to pitch, how to write a query letter? What are some of the mistakes that first-time authors make?
I'm with everyone on the read your manuscript over and over and over. And I would even recommend, it's time consuming, yes, but I would recommend reading it out loud. Because, and then not only reading it out loud, but if you have a beta reader or even just a really good friend that's really good with grammar, you know, and is really great at attention to detail also, that they can follow along in the book, in the manuscript while you're reading it out loud, because you will read it like you meant to write it, even if that's not what it said. And, you know, like we just don't see what's really there. And so another person could pick up on that, because when you're reading it, even if you're reading it out loud, you're still going to read it that same way and miss it. So that's one thing, is just that help from others. And then in that help from others, when somebody has read it before publishing, you know, your beta readers, I would ask them, you know, what was important about my book? What did you get from my book? What, you know, if you, would you tell somebody else you should really read this book? Well, when you say you should really read this book, the next question is why? Why should I read that book? You know, why is this an important book to be read? And then and formulate in your mind, what is the message you are trying to promote? I mean, what is it, you know, what are you trying to do with what you wrote, whether it's even, you know, just if it's a mystery, you know, how is it different? How is it unique? What graphs, why would, if you picked up and read that back jacket, what would make somebody buy the book? You know, and, you know, why is it? And so, you know, sitting back and thinking through that, I think is going to lead to a really good query letter and a really good pitch, you know, because you've given it thought and you've gotten the input from other people as to what did you get out of this? Sometimes people get something out of it. You know, every single person that reads a book gets something else new out of it, right? Or different. So it could be that they got something totally different that you didn't even know was there.
Thanks a lot. So for those of you on this webinar, I want to invite you to type in your questions for our panelists in the chat. You can either send those questions to everybody through the chat, or if you'd rather, you could send those specifically to me through the chat, and then I'll read those questions to our panelists after my final question. This is a two-parter. There's a specific part which you could answer and a broader part which you could answer one or both of these. The specific question for you all, and again, we'll start with Sue, is what should a first-time author read to learn more about the world of publishing, to demystify this kind of scary leap going from writer to author? Is there something that you can recommend that we read? The broader question is, any closing advice that you have for our prospective authors in the audience that you would like to share? Sue?
Well, I think that I just love research. And so if I'm getting ready to publish something, and it depends on, let's just say it's poetry, then I want to look and see who is publishing poetry. Get a name, and talking about query letters again, I wouldn't just say, dear madam, dear sir. I'd say, dear Richard Evans, or I would say, dear so-and-so. So I think that you need to know who is doing what currently, because it changes quite frequently. And I think I just noticed that Poetry Magazine has a new editor, or recently had a new editor. And finally, I think that you need to love it enough to spend the time to go over and over and over what you're writing to make it the best possible submission that you can. So you can't do that enough. So as Kim said, read it out loud, get somebody else to read it, and enjoy. I just think it's wonderful to be able to write your thoughts, your feelings about what you've read, and I think one should read widely.
That's great. Thank you. Dan, what do you think?
In terms of resources to help guide a first-time author, at least in terms of making them familiar with the publishing industry, I have plenty of resources for people who are working on academic and scholarly books, because that's a lot of what we do. But some of the resources I would suggest are there is kind of a publishing writing guru named Jane Friedman, whose blog is widely followed. She has a book of her own. Her blog is called Electric Speed, but her book is called The Business of Being a Writer. On her website, and I'll put the link in, she also lists books by many other people that are available from that are good introductory texts for people who want to know what to expect when they're navigating the publishing industry from the author's point of view. Another resource is Writer's Market, which is a big resource book that comes out, reference book that comes out almost every year. It's updated with lists of publishers and agents of every size and stripe. Poets and Writers Magazine and Poets and Writers website is also a good resource for articles, counsel to writers, whether you're a poet or a nonfiction writer or a fiction writer. They also have a great link on the Poets and Writers website to listings of small presses that one doesn't need an agent for, broken down by poetry, nonfiction, fiction. So I'll put those links into the chat, but those are the resources that come to mind that I think would be the most useful.
Great, thank you. Kim, any reading recs or general advice?
I think that my general advice would be to, once you've finished your manuscript to where you think it's finished, is to realize that it's still going to be quite a time span before you get it published, even if you're doing self-publishing, because it's going to take your own edits, you rereading your own edits, other people's edits. And in that process of the editing, it's like you understand what you were trying to get across. You understand what you wrote. But if someone else reads it and they don't understand it, then it needs help. It needs work. And then writers sometimes can be a little emotional, and they're just so invested in their work that when you try to critique or tell them that this doesn't make sense, or this didn't follow, or this plot's not working, or this character wasn't true to themselves, or anything like that, to not get defensive, but to just listen to that critique and take it in and mull it over and change what you can without losing your voice and the genuineness of what you're writing at the same time. The book that I was trying to think of, the book that helped me probably the most in understanding how long this process is to get to the publishing, is Stephen King wrote a book on writing. And he just, when he wrote, it was like, oh my gosh, he's so good, but he takes a long time. I mean, it takes him a long time, and you would think he'd have it down pat. But the book is from, when he first began publishing and first began writing and that kind of thing. But it just gave me a sense of, all right, when you finish the manuscript, you're not done at all. And to not get frustrated or angry or upset at how long this process takes. Just know it's going to take some time to get to the publishing phase, where you actually have that book in your hand.
Yeah. All right, so we have plenty of questions here from the audience in the chat, and we don't have to stick to our usual Sue, Dan, Kim pattern. If you want, at this point, whoever's most excited to answer the question can jump in, and we'll loosen things up a little bit. So we have several questions that I'll group together about query letters. So let's do a deep dive on how to do a good query letter. And so let's break this down to its barest bones. What is a query letter? We're talking about an email now, right? What's the right subject line for this email? How do you structure the pitch? How long should a query letter be? And are there any good websites that have examples of great query letters that we can use to model our own?
Well, I'll just say a few words. These days, especially if you're approaching small presses, small publishers, the most important thing to do is to study their submission guidelines. Before you even get to the point of drafting a query letter or a one-page prospectus or proposal, I think those are good things to have handy just in case, and just to help you think through yourself about when the time comes and the time is right, and how I'm going to put my foot forward. But every press and every publisher has different requirements about how to submit. Some want just a query letter and a one-page overview. Some want a query letter, an overview, and a sample chapter. Some will tell you to submit the entire manuscript, although that's not often the case. Some use submission platforms like Submittable. It's just an online platform that a lot of publishers and small literary magazines use to keep track of their submissions and to reply to them. So I wish there were a one-size-fits-all solution for any given query. But the more you study these submission guidelines from small presses, you'll start to see more commonalities in terms of what people are wanting you to do, what they want to see. My best answer to you is tailor your proposal or pitch to each press's specific guidelines, and adhere to those.
You or Kim?
I would not make the letter very lengthy. It doesn't need to be lengthy. I mean, you've got to, it's like give it your best shot in a short, the fewest words you possibly can, because they get thousands of these letters. You've got it, and make it something that'll jump out, that would catch their attention, but don't go on. I wouldn't make it more than a page, but that's just me.
I agree, not
Ultimately,
over a page.
I agree. They're going to want to see the work is the proof.
Right.
So it doesn't matter to a degree what you say in a pitch letter or a synopsis. It's
And for sure, make your query letter grammatically correct.
Great
I have
advice.
seen them where they're not. I mean, I'm like, whoa, stop.
Okay, great advice all around. A question here about self-publishing. This is a really good question I've never thought about before. If you do decide to self-publish, is there a chance that a publisher will discover your work on Kindle and then want to publish it in a traditional route? Does that ever happen? How often does that happen?
It does happen. There's a thought out there. I don't know what you would say, but there's kind of a maybe it's a rumor. I don't know if because I don't have any proof of this or not, but that if you use Kindle Direct Publishing and you're selling through Amazon, the more reviews you get that are positive, and there's this magic number of 50, and I'm not sure where that even comes from, but there's a lot of people that say that somewhere in that neighborhood that a publisher could pick it up. Then they would cause them to look at it and pick it up. It is possible.
I didn't know that. Dan or Sue, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Are you talking to me?
If you have any thoughts on this question of the question was, if you do publish on Kindle, if you choose to self-publish, will a publisher ever discover that and then want to publish your work in a traditional route? Dan, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think there are some well-known cases of that. I'm probably going to be mistaken in saying this, but yeah, there are people who have started off self-publishing that got picked up by major trade publishers because there was such an interest. Uh, you know, their novel or whatever went viral in some kind of way that attracted the interest of a major publisher. I think and again, I'm going to get this wrong, but there's some fantasy and science fiction franchises where, you know, there's a whole series of books, and it's not a lot of what I read, but I know that some of them that became New York Times best-selling series started off as being self-published books. I think that's very true of some romance writers too. I'm looking at a couple people on this call who will know those names much better than I will. But yes, in romance, science fiction, not just genre fiction, and fantasy, some people who have self-published do get picked up. It's a truth, but it's not the norm.
I'm learning from Bob and Joseph in the chat that The Martian was originally self-published before it was going on to tremendous success. I didn't know that. I learned that today.
I did not know that either. I think well, there are other instances, but people can fill up the chat with other ones that I don't know about or forgot. But yeah,
okay, that's great.
It's possible, but not probable.
Okay, we've got 2 more questions here in the chat, so there's still time for other questions if folks want to add those to the chat. I think I'll go with Allison's question next. Would you recommend a close edit by a professional editor prior to seeking an agent?
I would say that has more to do with your ability, you know, if you can edit your own work and with maybe the help of someone else, you might not need a professional editor, but I would say that many people do need a professional editor. I mean, I think that it would help them to have that service before they want to publish. I don't know, what do y'all think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it just depends on how much confidence you have in your own work, your ability to proofread it, your ability to get it into suitable shape for whether. I think it's just a matter of whether or not you really feel like the work is ready for other eyes. It certainly can't hurt. There's nothing to be lost by having a professional editor vet the work for its strengths, weaknesses, and highlight things that you might want to attend to before submitting it. Professional editors can also help you think about the best way to frame or pitch the work itself if you're not comfortable speaking on its behalf. Generally, you do have to pay for those services to get the services of someone who looks at it with an eye towards agent submission. So I think it's a matter of whether or not you want to spend the money on that, and whether or not you feel like it would buy you a measure of comfort. It's a very individual choice.
Sue, do you have thoughts on this question of when to work with an editor?
I think that the writer himself, herself, is they know their work so well, and you get to the point where you don't actually see what it is anymore. And I know that for my press and for my co-publisher editor, Sandra Grace, we never publish a book until we edit it carefully, so that we do that ourselves. I don't want to put out a book that's full of typos. And I have seen books that have numerous typos in them. So published books already. So I think it's very important that a book is edited, however it gets edited, but certainly needs more than just the writer's eyes.
Right. Thank you so much. And we have a helpful comment here in the draft or in the chat about distinguishing between a proofreader and an editor. I know there's a lot of overlap between those two kind of duties, but yeah, I take all of your points on this. One more question in here about self-publishing, and this is also one that I've not considered before. So if you self-publish a book, let's say through Amazon's Kindle platform, once that book is out there in the world, is it possible to go back and make changes to the book after it's been published? Say you want to change the ending after you get feedback from readers, for example. Can you make changes after you've self-published a book?
You can. It's recommended that you don't do anything substantial in the change. But if you like, say you got it out there and people are pointing out that you have different grammatical errors, or you left out a whole paragraph or something doesn't make sense. I mean, there's some minor changes that you're allowed to change it. You are, but they recommend that you don't change the substance of course of the book. So I don't know about changing the ending. I haven't thought about that. What do y'all? I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't had anybody want to
It's
do
like
that.
a pretty major change to make the ending of the book.
Yeah, that would be a major change to change the ending. I was thinking about Hemingway and how many times he changed the ending of, when he was writing. It's like, I'm like, I think once it's out there that the ending is the ending.
Let
I'd
me
like to say something about the printer. We've talked about everything, but we haven't talked about who is actually going to print your book. And that may be Ingram or whoever it may be. But I mean, yeah, but some publishers or printers will charge you for everything you change after that book is printed. You'll get a copy, a preview or a copy. But if you change after that, then it's upon the writer to, to pay for those changes, because that's expensive.
That's great. Thank you.
I'll just say it's not hard to go into KDP and you just take it down, you take it off the sale, you take it out for a little bit, make the change and put it back up. It's not difficult.
Great. Okay, so we're nearly reaching the end of our time here. I want to reserve a few minutes for our three panelists to leave us with some final words or some parting advice as we go out in the world to try to get our works published. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we wrap up today? Let's begin with Sue.
I love publishing. And I often say, how did I get into this? And I think that it really goes back to, I was editor of my high school newspaper. And I would go down to, in Foley, the Onlooker, and stand and watch how they put the whole thing together. And I thought it was magic, and I still do. I love the whole process from the very beginning. And I love promoting other writers and seeing that they get their book into print. And I would like to say that I think that interviewing those writers, and we're getting ready to publish a book and are interviewing the author of that book so we can put that on our website.
That's great. I love promoting authors too. And I want to remind you all again that that's what we do here at the Alabama Writers Forum. So please join our community. Dan, do you have any parting advice for our prospective authors in the crowd?
Yeah, I would say this. The prospect of publishing or not publishing or having your work accepted or not accepted, I would do everything you can to not let that become such a hang up that it gets in the way of the work. Nothing matters more than your fidelity to your vision. staying true to your voice, getting the work the way you want it. That's its own gratification. And it may get out into the world and between two covers, it may not. But that's ultimately where I think the greatest sense of gratification and satisfaction is going to come from for any writer. If it ends up making it out into the world and you can put it aside in a way that allows you to think about its commercial prospects, that's fine. That's great. Do it. Pursue it. See what happens. But if it ends up proving a frustrating road, I know it's a hard thing for people to convince themselves of, but hopefully, I hope it won't matter that much to you, that that the work that you've done and the writing that you've done and being true to your own voice and getting it right on the page, I hope that will always be each writer's first and final ambition.
Great. That's great. Kim, your parting thoughts.
In all that, I just love, I love writing. I love reading. You know, it doesn't feel like work. It's just fun, you know, and to not lose the fun in all this and the importance, you know, it's important to have your thoughts down and on that paper. And then I think to just find a group, even a small group that can encourage you and be supportive of you and can read some of the things that you're writing, that you can bounce ideas off. I love just sitting down and listening to people's ideas and reading some of their work and giving critique and seeing them get excited about going back and writing more. I mean, that's I think we can do that for each other, you know, just keep the spark lit and that's that's what's important, is to just keep encouraging and supporting each other to put our thoughts out there, you know, to get them down. And
Yeah, I want to second that. Writing in community is the only way I can imagine writing. It's such a lonely process without having other people to bounce ideas off of and to be accountable to, and how whatever shape your writing group takes, I think it's a good idea to do that. And if you're having trouble finding a writing group, reach out to us at the Writers Forum. That's something that we can help you do. So thank you to our panelists.
Thank
you to our
you
guests.
very much for organizing this and putting it together. Without you, we wouldn't be here.
Oh, wow. Thanks a lot. We're going to do a lot more of these. We were really overwhelmed by the amount of interest we had in this workshop. So we want to make this a regular thing. And I think our Writers Forum workshops going forward will be even more tailored to specific questions and interest. But I think this was a terrific place for us to start. And I appreciate everybody coming. And I appreciate, again, our panelists for their wise insights today. So that'll wrap it up. Thank you all for coming, and follow us on Facebook. Check us out at writersforum.org, and let's write together in community. Thank you, everybody.